Yeah, I just keep it steady on the magic. Do my thing, I'm healing, it's fantastic. If I fall, rise automatic. You ain't no now, you know. I'm the one raise myself like a tree from the roots. West side girl, cause she lit in the coast. East side girl when she speaks to the roots. Stay 100 cause she on with the truth. Been down struggle, know that it pass. Only going up, yeah, the pain don't last. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. This is take off, take off, take off. Shorty like Brandy, fight like Monica. What you know about her? Baby girl rising, way to the top. Shaking the world, don't expect her to stop. Purpose so great, she get what she got. Follow her step, cause she following God. What you need more, got a heart full of gold. Even at times when it's raining and cold. Ooh, she bout take off. Ooh, she bout.
Hey, y'all, it's your girl Hannah, aka Ruta, and you are watching the Uprooted Network. Y'all already know today is Manifest Mondays, and we are continuing our series on understanding forgiveness with my guy Hayet. He will be joining me shortly. And y'all, in case y'all didn't remember, it's Whittier Cafe out here, Mility's Coffee Shop out in Denver. Please make sure you are supporting in all the ways that you can. Our sis does so much great advocacy work for the people, and we want to make sure we are supporting her. So, with that being said, I hope y'all are ready. I hope y'all had a beautiful weekend. Y'all, yesterday I had a beautiful episode with my guy Dav. And if you didn't watch it, go make sure you run that back. I'm gonna have it uploaded so that you can stream it everywhere else. So make sure you're sharing it with your friends. You already know we are on all the platforms now. And so, yeah, there's no more excuses. If you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you are subscribed on those so you can always be notified when we are ready to go. But yeah, how's everybody doing? How's your Monday? And let me make sure. Hold on. Try to get Hyatt. That you are taking care of yourself. Today I had a really beautiful conversation with the Clubhouse fam about our sleep. And I just want to throw out a couple tips there, since we all struggling with sleep, we all struggling with anxiety. And y'all, make sure you are putting together some type of routine for yourselves so that you can make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep every night. We are fighting a really sick psychological warfare here, and sleep is your best friend. I know it's hard, but I can give you guys more tips at a later time. My guy Hyatt is here. Let me see if it's hating on me. Try to get him up here. Yes, count our blessings. What up, what up, what up? Uh-oh. Is it me? Is it you?
It's probably me.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. I feel like every time I see you, you even more grizzly.
Yeah, I know. I need to get a barber out here.
Listen. And then I got this stupid pimple that just wanted to show up on my face like I don't need to be on camera. But I was like, you know what? That's okay.
I didn't even notice it until you said that, though.
Until I pointed it out. Damn. It's okay. It is okay. You know, I know who I am. I walk in my truth. I'm not ashamed. Happens to
Come on.
everybody. Um, but yes, dude, first and foremost, it was a great talk last time. I ended up having several follow-up conversations. For those who don't know, we're doing a series on understanding forgiveness in whatever way that shows up in your life. If you are Tagaru and you're relating this to the ongoing genocide, that's one thing, but also just in life, people hurt us. So the skill set of learning how to forgive and release and find that inner peace for yourself is really important. So we wanted to like touch on that. And last week we were talking about overcoming hate. This week we want to talk about the skill of listening, because listening is a skill. So me and you do this well. We do this well with each other. We're very good at like giving each other space, but I know it's something that we both have practiced for a long time. So Oh, in case people don't know you, this is Hyatt. Hyatt. In case everyone forgot who you are already, which I don't think they did, but you know. So it's like there's a little bit of a lag, so I can never tell when you're talking. It's so weird, but we're gonna work through this. So Hyatt's gonna talk to us today about like active listening, like empathetic listening, and kind of just what that skill set really is. Um, as we like this series is really about like manifesting the life that we want and becoming the people we want to be. So we're trying to also bring in skill sets to have so that you can actually achieve that. Like this is the work part of manifesting. So I'm gonna pass the mic to you and get us started.
Yeah. Is the lag pretty bad, or should I just keep going and then?
No, you're okay. It just was like I think it's because I'm looking at your face, but I can hear you okay.
Okay, good. All right, just want to make sure it's okay for playback as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tonight we decided to do this series on forgiveness, and as we were talking, I think about 2 months ago, I mentioned this last week as well, or maybe 3 months ago. It's September, yeah.
I think we're in September now. I don't know. Honestly,
Wow.
time just be moving. I know, time just be moving.
Yeah, I think this is back in like early July or like late June, but either or, we had a conversation and we got to talking about, okay, so how do we have forgiveness? Like, what is this concept of forgiveness, and how do we kind of claim that for ourselves? Because it's something that's so hard to really achieve, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to, oh, what's up, Honey Creative Studios? What's going on?
Yes.
Um, so it's really hard to achieve in a space where we're at now, like with war and interregional conflict, especially
Mhm.
ethnic hatred. Like, how do you overcome all these obstacles, all these, I wouldn't call them barriers, just this, they're obstacles of how do we overcome so much grief, so
Mhm.
much, I would say, hate, anger, and how do we reconcile with people that we want to be, we don't want to be reconciled to. And this applies into any context, whether it's not just, it's not ethnic violence or ongoing civil war. You can use these principles in any contextual situation, whether it's interpersonal with your friends, or with your colleagues at work, or professionally. Like, you can use these principles anywhere you go. So we thought it would be really cool, and so we divided it into 4 parts. And so
Yep.
this is the second part in the series. So listening to understand.
Mhm.
And we want to talk about listening because it's very important. Like, you can't, you, the steps to reconciliation, it starts within, right? So we have
Yep.
anger that's within us, and if anger fully blooms, as we talked about, it can lead to hatred, right? And we have to kind of resolve that in ourselves before we can kind of move on to the next step. And
Mhm.
that's like actually going to the table and sitting with someone that you might not like, someone you probably hate, someone you have a lot of anger towards, and you're sitting at the table and you're listening. And I think that's one of the hardest steps we can do, because it moves us from this place of passivity, and um, it's more explicit to kind of just be actively hating, but then actually we have to move to active listening. So going
Mhm.
from a passive stance, maybe it's active as well, like you're actively like hating something, or you're not realizing subconsciously, like you're using words that we talked about last week that kind of lead to this place of, oh, I actually don't like this, or I hate this, and like you kind of catch yourself using this language. I think we talked about it on Clubhouse, I
Yep.
believe.
Yeah,
So
we did. For
yeah.
people who missed the clubhouse, we did. We talked about that. Like how we say, "Oh, I hate this thing," or like, "I hate my life." We're speaking that to ourselves, and like our mind is not understanding that we're joking. They're just gonna, our brain is just gonna take that as fact. So you got to be careful about the way that you speak to yourself as well as the way you speak to others.
Yeah, that's important, the way of self-talk. That's a different
Mhm.
topic, but it's good.
Yes.
Yeah, I need to work on that myself. I'm very hard on myself, but
Listen, we all do. Okay, it is. How old are we? Let's not age ourselves, but
yeah, let's not do that.
go ahead, Hazel.
Yeah, no. So listening. So why do we move from a place of anger to listening? Because I believe it's like the next step logically to
Hmm.
move towards accepting responsibility whether you're the person that's committed something or someone else is, you can't move from a place of anger and then straight to, forgiveness or not reconciliation, responsibility, accepting and like taking ownership of what's happened, unless you go from a place of that to like there's something in the middle, and it's listening. Like we have to
Yeah.
listen to understand. And why do we listen? Obviously to increase our capacity to understand, but it moves us from a place of anger and understanding to empathy to responsibility and hopefully forgiveness. And
Yes.
so that's why we thought it was really important to talk about listening, because it's something that we have to actively work on and something we have to actively, be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes two people to listen, one person to talk, one person to listen. And you might not agree with someone, but it's that um, it's that place of listening that you kind of come to this space of, okay, I'm listening and I hear you, I understand you. I might not like you, I might not agree with what you're saying, but at least you can understand perspectives of, let's say, adversaries, people who you consider enemies or frenemies. We have a lot of those, right? Frenemies. And
Ooh.
you can at
Yes.
least, suspend judgment through disagreement, and that's through the active listening. So that's where we're at now. I can go on and kind of talk more, or if you want to chime in, Rita, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the key part of like for me is the understanding does not automatically mean you agree with the person.
Yep.
You know, I think sometimes what I notice is like a roadblock or a hindrance in people like actually becoming good listeners is not listening to react and actually fully just trying to listen to understand someone. I think sometimes I'll speak for myself. I think in the past, what I feel like if I didn't contradict like what they were saying, that I was somehow co-signing it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like, hold on, before you go further, I just want to make it clear that I don't agree with you. And that doesn't help the conversation, you know? It's like I haven't really fully even heard the rest of what they have to say. I'm just like thinking about myself in the moment instead of thinking about what is it that the other person is trying to express to me before I jump in and like I just have to tell them that I disagree with them. Like you don't always have to do it right in that moment. You can wait, let the person finish their thought and then be like also look for like are there parts of them that you do understand and agree with and then can you point out like okay, here's where I differ, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, 100%. And I think when we come to that place of, and sorry, I'm just pulling my notes up here.
No, you're good.
Uh, and I think when we come to that place of actually sitting at the table and addressing the conflict, I think that's one step
Mhm.
closer towards reconciliation, and it
Yeah.
brings us one step closer towards forgiveness. And so, is it idealistic? Perhaps, yeah, it's very idealistic to kind of suspend, so much conflict and so much, I don't know, maybe rage, anger, like you fill in the blank, like whatever you feel towards the other person, to
Mhm.
kind of suspend those things and to kind of sit at a table. It's very idealistic, but I think it really is achievable.
Mhm.
And I'm not just kind of making this up out of my own thin air. This is actually principles that were used from a book. It's an organization as well, but they published a book. It's
Mhm.
called Interfaith Just Peacemaking. And so a lot of interfaith religious scholars, whether they're um, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, they got together and they said, okay, how do we resolve conflict? And how do we resolve conflict, not just, interpersonally, but on a national scale as well for conflicts that are happening globally. And
Yep.
so these are principles that are used widely by a lot of world leaders, including, I think I mentioned this last week as well, by former President Barack Obama. He mentioned inside of this in his acceptance speech for his Nobel
Mhm.
Peace Prize during his first presidency. So um, whether you agree with his politics or not, I think these principles hold a lot of weight. And so in case you guys were really curious about which principle this is, it's actually principle number 3. So practice norm number 3 was what they call it. And
Mhm.
this is using cooperative conflict resolution. So you're using um, cooperation as a result to bring yourself and the other party towards an agreement of peace. And this is like one of the first things where it starts at is like getting to the table and sitting down and actually having that conversation. And it's funny because when we think of listening, we sometimes, and we can chime in as well with that, we think we're listening, but we're actually just waiting to speak.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. They waiting to react.
Yeah, you're waiting to react, and it's actually really destructive because you actually don't engage with what the person is saying because you always come with these preconceived notions. All right,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna get all this out, and then after that, like I'll feel better, and my slate will be clean, and I'll feel great, and I think it's okay to do that when it comes to maybe perhaps self therapy or therapy with the counselor,
Yeah.
but when you're actually looking towards understanding people and understanding and getting to know more about this conflict or getting to like actually sit down at a table with someone else, it's going to require listening and not just spewing of words. I think that's great. And you probably chime this as well. Like it's great for like as a tool to like write down your thoughts towards a person,
Yep.
where they are to kind of release all that, but perhaps like that person never going to read it, but it's just for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And I think those tools and methods are great with counseling, but when it comes to like again like actually having a conversation, it's not going to help just to word vomit and then kind of peace out and leave the table of negotiation or just the conversation with the person. You're not
Yeah.
helping anybody else if you're just gonna be there to word vomit yourself out and then kind of leave the conversation as is just because it makes you feel better. The idea with listening is that you actually listen to understand, and like you're saying, you might not agree with the person, you might not like the person, but you can actually kind of gauge and see, okay, I understand where they're coming from. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily agree with it, but I can see why they would think that. And I think when we come to this place of understanding, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean in a place of agreement, like you were saying, but it comes to a sense of, okay, I understand, and I want to move on from this. And it's funny because when you actually listen to understand, you can move from both uh, being like a mutual aggressor or adversary to
Mm-hmm.
working together to address a common problem. Because at the underlying tension of conflict, there's a problem, right? And there's a
Yep.
problem that you want to solve. And so, how do we move from this problem, or sorry, how do you move from coming here to here, and then find some happy medium in the middle to resolve peace and resolve conflict. And so, um, I can go into some of the notes I had, or if you want to say something.
Yeah, no, I had a couple thoughts. And that's a good example, right? Like we're having a dialogue, so you're making space for me to like add in, right? Like it's not the
Mhm.
word vomiting where you're doing the whole thing and I'm just here as like the wallflower. Like, it's like give the other person some space too. If they choose not to take it, that's cool, right? But
Right.
if they do have a thought, let them share it so that you can continue on with the dialogue. And some of the things that you were saying that I thought were cool to highlight were the conversation kind of happens in parts, right? Because you were talking about like the dress rehearsal almost, right? Like before you even sit down for the conversation, if you're already thinking about like these are the things I want to say, this is what I want to get off my chest, da, 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 that's okay, right? But you have to like you can't also just assume that the other person is not going to have thoughts and feelings that they want to share too, right?
Mm.
Or the other part where you have this whole imagination of how the conversation is going to go, and what if that person comes in and completely surprises you, and now
Mhm.
all that stuff that you had rehearsed is no longer necessary, right? Like, oh well, I was prepared for battle. Like, why are you preparing for battle? Like, like you are prepared to have a conversation. And I think the other thing that you said that was key was that you're trying to solve a problem, so you're not necessarily sitting down to just vent. Like when you're doing the word vomit, then you're venting. You're not really actually there to have a conversation with the other person. You were just trying to get your feelings off, and then that's therapy. Like you can do that with a therapist. You can do that with a friend. Your friends are your therapists too, if they're good ones. In which you're not really looking for the response. You're just getting the things off of your chest. So if you're actually coming to conversation for resolution, for reconciliation, then you have to understand that it's not about you and the other person going at it. It's like, how do we come at this problem to solve it? Like, where, like, you're coming into this to understand where in our logics are we not agreeing, And is there a place we can compromise, or is this going to be one of those, we are going to agree to disagree, and then let's talk about how we can move forward, understanding that we don't believe the same thing? Like, is there a path forward?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's great, Rita. It's such a good point you brought up. Like, are we agreeing to disagree and moving forward, or are we just at a stalemate and we can't
Mm-hmm.
come back to the table because there's no path forward? And I think with conflict, obviously, it's going to look different for every single person. I guess in the context of what's happening to Tigray,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to require a lot of listening. But before that, it's going to obviously require, a ceasefire, a move
Yeah.
of nonviolent direct action, which we're seeing with protesting and raising awareness.
Yeah.
And it's going to come to a place of where we have to at least agree on the set of facts.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool, and to use former President Barack Obama as an example. He did an interview with David Letterman. I'm not too sure when it was, maybe a couple years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
when asked like, "What's the greatest threat that we face?" and I
Mm.
think to surprise everyone, former president said disinformation, and disinformation is the biggest battle that we face because if we
Yep.
can't agree on a set of facts, then we're always going to argue with different premises. Well, you did
Yep.
this, you did this, you did that, and it's funny because, well, it's not funny. It's actually really sad that we continually have to fight for the set of facts that are very true to be
Yeah.
to be understood as this is what's happening. And you see a lot of disinformation that's being circulated, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on social media, about things that the Tigrayan government are doing, which is not true. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting because if this conflict had been covered from the start by, like, national news syndicates and organizations, I wonder what kind of facts that we kind of set the table to agree on and to use as a premise for both parties to say, okay, this is what happened, these are the facts. But when we can't come to that place of, well, this is what happened, then we're always going to be at a stalemate because we can't agree. And so I think one of the biggest things when it comes to solving conflict is the ability to listen, but also to start from a shared set of facts. Because if we're coming to the table and we believe in two different things, then the chances are conflict is most likely not going to be resolved because
Yep.
you're coming with two different angles, and maybe one person's facts are their set of facts are false, or someone else's, and so we don't have an agreed medium where we're approaching, and so
Yeah.
that's really really important as a basis to kind of agree on a set of facts before we can kind of move to the table, or at least understand or like listen, even if we don't agree with what they're saying, to
Mm-hmm.
understand where they're coming from. Perhaps it's maybe not true, but it's what they're feeling, and we have to recognize that and respect that, and give someone the space to be able to to articulate exactly their position and where they're coming from, whether or not we agree with it's false or it's true. It's important to like open the space for dialogue to be able to have the guile to listen without arguing, to listen without yelling, to listen without waiting to chime back, or to clap back, as they would say, on the internet. um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really important. So um, I'm not sure if you want to dive more into that because I do have some other examples that we can kind of dive into.
Yeah, we can. There was something too that you were saying, and I think there's something like there's a precursor, right? In order for you to be a good active listener, or to be able to actually come into a conversation
Mm-hmm.
with the idea of being empathetic, right? To try and understand, to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and like
Mm-hmm.
your points about what set of facts are we working with, right? Um, Sometimes the hardest thing in the world to do is like literally just not respond and like just sit there and like listen and take everything in. But what I was thinking about when you were talking is like, how do you know you're ready to do that, right? Because if you're still hurt and you're trying to have this conversation and you can feel that anger rising in you, you're not really like listening. Or like if you're getting triggered and things, then you're not really listening. Like it turns off your ability. So I think there's even a conversation you have to have with yourself, whether that's writing in your journal, speaking with friends too, it might help, is like, let me try to process a bit of my emotions and things that I'm feeling before I enter this conversation, just so that you can like listen with open ears.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really important, to come to the table with, you know, a sense of, okay, I'm here to listen and not just to vent, like you said, or I'm here to actually resolve something.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's so hard to kind of move from these stages. And I think there are stages. It's not going to happen in one fall swoop. It's going to
Yeah.
take, it's weeks, months, years to be able to kind of be able to come to this place of, one, being in a sense healed and being a bit whole in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and not harboring this hatred or this resentment, and wanting to resolve something. And I think it is important because, like we were talking about earlier last week, holding this resentment, this anger, it does nothing but harm ourselves. And so
Yeah.
why do we hold on to poison that's gonna eventually kill us, and hurt us even more? I think you mentioned on Clubhouse that, no, I'm not sure if I did mention it here, but you said that your grandpa, he passed away
Mm-hmm.
from hypertension, or
I don't think they had medical terms like that back
mm,
then, to really define what the issue was. But the way that my dad explained it was that like he had a lot of anger all the time, and like he
mm,
had like, I think it was like, kind of that high blood pressure, hypertension situation where
right,
you're always angry and you're always trying to like get that off, but you're like not able to do it. And
mm,
when you let that stuff eat you inside, eventually your body is going to deteriorate, you know,
mm,
especially with what they were going through. Like, imagine, like, even what the people back home are facing, right? If it's not the famine, right? And it's not someone actually attacking you, um, it's the thoughts that come around that, the frustration of like not being able to speak up for yourself, like wanting to fight back and not being able to do it, and you're holding all that in, and you're not able to resolve the inner conflict and the outer conflict that's happening. Like, your heart is bound to like be so tight and tensed up that eventually it'll stop working.
mm. Yeah, I'm not a health professional by any means, but like everything you said makes sense. Where if if we're so hold on, um, and bent on like this idea of anger and hatred, like it only eats at us internally, and who knows, like the myriad of health problems I can release, like what stress and anxiety can do to a body, the same that
Oh
can
yeah.
do with food well. And so, one of the things that kind of caught me when you were talking earlier, was this, idea of empathy and like listening to understand. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways we can get, when it comes to listening, and active listening as well, is to develop, empathy. And that's obviously one of the themes that we're talking about today. But I guess to kind of give it more of like a biblical, foundation, because I am a Christian, like that's a full disclosure, and someone that
Yeah.
believes in the teachings of Christ. And one of the principles, I guess, that we can kind of glean from today, if you will, it's almost like a direct continuation of from last week when we were talking about, John 4, and Jesus at the well with the woman who was a Samaritan woman, and she was from obviously, same people group, but just from a, different tribe.
Yep.
And it's funny that, Jesus uses this example again of the Good Samaritan, and how
Mm-hmm.
someone was, beat up, stranded on the road. I'm not sure if you guys know this parable, but it comes from Luke chapter 10, verses, I think it's 25 through 30, let me see, 37. So I just, but yeah, and so, it's this example that Jesus uses, and I'll just paraphrase just for time's sake, that
Yeah.
he uses where, someone is stranded on the road, they're in critical health condition, and a neighbor passes by, doesn't do anything. A priest, surely a priest, passes by. You think this priest is going to help out this guy who needs help. He actually crosses the street, and lo and behold, a Samaritan, person comes and sees a man, you know, takes him to an inn, modern day term for a hotel or somewhere to stay, pays for his room for however long it takes for him to recover, and if more money needs to be paid, he said, I'll come back and and pay off any of the fees that are associated with keeping this guy healthy, but also seeing him come back to his good health.
Yeah.
And to our context, that doesn't really, shock us in a sense. Like, oh, okay, obviously, you want to take care of people if they're hurting, they're sick. Obviously, we always hear that phrase, "Good Samaritan." There's a lot of Good Samaritan hospitals as well, right?
There
Across the
are.
country.
My aunt worked at one.
Yeah, they really worked at one, and so without really realizing the context, well, the Samaritan and the Jews actually hated each other. They're ethnic enemies. Long story short, they were once part of one kingdom called Israel, and they split off. And Israel was to the north, Judah was to the south. Israel eventually got conquered, and they went against the covenant they made with God, and they intermarried with their oppressors and their colonizers, and that was seen as a direct, I guess, violation of the covenant that they made with God and the Torah and the law. This is on the Bible. I'm not making this up. So you guys like this? That sounds crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. This is in the Bible. And so they were considered by Jews like inbreds as well. And so there was this ethnic hatred that they had toward each other because they saw the Samaritans as people who were violating, but then also manipulating the law, something that was so sacred and dear to both of them. And so they were in constant battle with each other for centuries. And when a first century Jewish audience from Jesus telling the story would have told them, when they would have heard this, they would have been so shocked, and they would have probably gasped when they said, and the Samaritan person, went and helped this person, picked them up, put them in an inn, look after their needs, and wanted to see them healed. And that would have shocked a first century listener when they heard this parable. And I wonder, if we can kind of flip this and kind of put it into our context, who is our enemy, or who is our perceived enemy, and would you expect that person to help you out? Would you expect this person to, do something that you wouldn't expect to be done for you, and to see this to completion? And I think, it really ties into compassion and to empathy, because Jesus, what he was trying to do was he was trying to expand the capacity of empathy among his followers, whether it was economic, whether it was ethnic, or whether it's political classes. He was always trying to expand the empathy of his followers, but also people who listened, to kind of see where the other person's coming from, but also to love, not blindly, but to love unconditionally, even when people are doing, heinous things towards you. I think we talked about this in, it might be a Clubhouse, where there's a photo of an elderly woman, and she's feeding one of the ENDF soldiers.
Yeah.
And people look at that and they're like, oh my gosh, how could she? Tigrayans, they're too forgiving, they're too peaceful, and I think that's our downfall, because we're just too compassionate, we're too empathetic, and we're too quick to forgive. And I want to challenge that notion. I'm listening. I'm not going to completely say I disagree with that, but I want to, in a sense, challenge those people who kind of have those views, because I think it's so understanding that you would think that way, and you would say, oh yeah, why would you help someone who's your enemy? Why would you help someone who's done so much wrong? Who's we don't have to talk about the atrocities that have been committed. That's well documented. You can go to just Google Tigray genocide, and you'll see a slew of all of the crimes against humanity that's been committed. But it even goes with the TDF soldier handing a water bottle to the ENDF soldier, and he's looking at her in the eye, and the woman, she's taking the bottle, but she doesn't dare look at him, and I guess maybe there's this shame attached to it, this sign of defeat. But I think, kind of tying it back biblically, it's there's this compassion under persecution to still love your enemy, despite what's happened. And I think that requires such a resolve, not only within, but a faith that is not easily shaken under the most dire and harsh circumstances that people are actually facing today. Right now, as we speak, people are facing starvation. They're facing death, and how do you still have compassion for people? And it's it's hard, and I think the best example we can look to, again, to draw from the Biblical foundation, is to look at Jesus. When he was being arrested, Peter, one of his disciples, decided to say, "Oh no, like we're gonna help you out." Jesus is like, "No," and he goes willfully to his death. He willfully goes to the cross, and he's willfully arrested, and he's willfully executed with the most disgusting, most heinous way that someone can be executed publicly, and the embarrassment behind it, the toil, the emotional, the physical, the just the spiritual suffering that he had to go through to endure that, and he willingly did that. And I look at that, and it's like, wow, like not only did this person display compassion, but how can we learn from this compassion and this empathy to kind of bring that, I guess, into our context? How can we willingly listen to understand, but also listen to produce empathy and to produce compassion, to love someone who we might not love, to sit down and have a conversation with someone who you're enemies with? Like,
Yeah.
how do we actually do that? And I think it's exampled very beautifully. I'm not going to get too much detail about that,
Yeah.
but I think we have so much to draw from, like inspiration-wise, that it's all out there for us to kind of glean from and listen to. And I hope a little bit of that was sprinkled today.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot in that, and yeah, we did unpack that on Clubhouse. It is really, how I understand it for myself, because when I saw those images, I like, there's a little bit of confliction.
Mm.
But more so than anything, I was like proud to say we're not like them. Like, we're not the hateful people that would do this to you, that you're trying to make us be. Like, even when you're hurting me, I have enough self-love, and I believe in my own value system and my faith, right, that I'm not going to be your level, even when you're giving me every reason to be valid in that, right? Like, we have every reason to be valid, like, to feel vindicated, to feel validated in the fact that, like, what, compared to what they did to me, this is nothing, like, and you can do that, right? But it's like, it takes so much more resolve to stand in your conviction, and to stand in your belief and your faith that, like, that's not the world you want to live in, that's the person you want to become. And like, when I meet my maker, I can say that I really did, as much as I can, try to become that person, the person that actually follows the faith, that actually follows what it means to be a decent human being and to have love and compassion for others. And I feel like we're having the biggest test of our life right now, of like how, like, and I had a video that went a little viral in the beginning where I was like, my goal for this and for myself is to come out of this not losing my humanity and my and my empathy for other people, even though that's what they're trying to take from me, because it's intentional. They want us to be that. They want to break us to the point where we're miserable human beings, and that we're constantly fighting, and that we're constantly like trying to hurt others, right? And we said this last week in the Clubhouse too, that it's like, hurt people hurt people. So how do we end that cycle? Like, somebody has to be the bigger person and stop trying to hurt everybody else. Like, and to release it. That's what the forgiveness is. In order for me to not do that, I have to forgive, and I have to release it, so that I don't carry it inside of me and wait for an opportunity to take that out on somebody else, is how I see it.
Yeah. And I think, kind of to respond to that, it's like you were saying, like, canceling or like exiting the cycle of revenge. Like, it does you no good to spin in the same circle, to spin in the same web, to live in this cycle of anger, of denial, of just hate. Maybe it can be self-hate as well, but obviously in our context, it's explicit hate towards someone, and it does us no good to continue in this cycle of revenge, retaliation, because at the end, how do you produce peace? How do you resolve conflict if you're in this cycle of revenge? You're in this cycle of retaliation, like a tit for tat kind of feud. And honestly, there's no other way to resolve conflict without actually engaging and peacemaking. And so That's why I think these principles are so important, because they're life changing, and it's hard, and they're so idealistic, and we have to really break them down and contextualize them to a point like where we can make this more feasible in our context. Because yeah, it does seem so idealistic. Like, oh my goodness, yeah, of course I need to stop having hate for people. I need to love my enemies, of course, yeah, and all these principles sound so great in theory, but
Yeah.
when we have to outwork them, it requires a lot of internal work. It's going to require a lot of patience. It's going to require to be able to listen, to understand, to have empathy, and to be able to have the patience to approach someone, to listen when you don't really like someone, when you don't have the same beliefs. It can be interfaith wise, like someone who's from a different religion or a different ethnic background. How do you come to that table? And I'm speaking with such a somber tone because it's something that I think it's very serious. Obviously, the conversation we're having now it's quite serious. It's heavy in a sense, and my heart does feel a bit heavy, because it's something that's so near and dear to, I don't know, both of us. What's happening back in Tigray, but also what's happening around the world. This is something that we don't take lightly. It's something that we don't take with a cheerful stance by any means. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, like it requires that sense of wanting to break the cycle, and to be that generation that says, okay, this is what's happened in the past. Maybe this might have happened with generations prior, but we're going to be that generation that stops this hatred, that stops the needless conflict, the endless conflicts, the endless wars, and we're going to be that generation that sets the tone, that sets the pace for future generations to come, and be like, okay, we can be the generation that people who would be able willingly to stand on our shoulders and look, okay, this is the way forward. This is how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's hard. It's hard. I think that's what the tone is, right? It's like it's really easy to say things. It's another to live them. And
Mm.
like you saying, sometimes it's idealistic. That's the challenge of life, right? Like we all have ideals and beliefs and whatever, and it's cool to have them, but if you don't live them, you know, then it's just empty words.
Mm.
And you can make yourself sound like a good person, but it's another thing to be a good person and to actually like live your life in that and to walk in that every day. I feel like every day I have to like wake up and understand somebody's still trying to hurt me and I still have to forgive. Like
Mm.
every single day. It's it's like muscle memory at this point because I'm practicing it so much. It's like, oh, okay, right? Like I'm almost waiting for the day, like at least for the genocide in this context, that I don't
Mm.
have to keep doing that, right? And that this can actually be over. But I'm practicing it now so that when I do get to that point where I have to go, not even have to, but like I want to go back home, I want to see people, and I have to actually face the reality of it. I want
Mm.
to be in such a place that I can have space in my heart to hear them out and to not bring in my hatred and like kind of validate theirs or reaffirm theirs. Like I want to be able to
Mm.
at least be a voice that can have them pause and think, you
Yeah.
know like have whatever feelings, have all the feelings, because you get to feel however you want. You have been victimized. I'm not gonna like police the victim. Oh, sorry,
Mm.
garbage truck. It's garbage day. It's kind of loud.
Oh, it's garbage here as well.
Big old loud truck. But that's literally it for me. And part of that is like having to have these dialogues and even just listening to people who have been victimized, because I do this constantly, right? It's
Right.
like, okay, I have to really listen to understand completely what it is you're feeling, what you've gone through, why, what like why you got to this conclusion, whatever the case is, and completely understand you before I sit here and advise you to be like, no, you just got to move on, you got to forgive, you got to do it. Like, no, I have to completely understand where you're at and where you're coming from and where your heart posture is, where your mental is, so that like I'm handling you with care in a way that you have not been handled yet. And the only way I can do that, the only way I can be an active listener listener there and to be empathetic and to hold space, because everyone's always like, how do you hold so much space for people? Because I've done all this forgiveness on my side. I've done all the stuff on my side, so that when I'm coming to talk to you, I'm not bringing my problems into this. I'm not bringing my viewpoints and my understanding into this. I want to understand you first. And if you are ready to hear how I feel and think about it, then I will share that. But it's not necessarily to force anyone to move positions. You know, you got to let people heal in the way. And that's why I said even like a precursor to you being able to sit and be an active listener and get to the point where you want to reconcile with someone, you have to have done some of that work, you know, and you have to have the safe place to do that, to unpack and to start to understand yourself before you try to get somebody else to understand you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was like the...
That's it?
that was the mic drop. I was like, I don't got anything else to say after that.
Okay.
She done said it all.
Listen, all right. That's what we like to do around here. Oh, my girl Beelan said, I really appreciate this conversation here and on Clubhouse. I just want to add that acknowledging and making room for the impulse for revenge is a big part of transcending it. Yeah, absolutely. You can't like try to fix something that you have not acknowledged, you know? Like, you got to be real with yourself, where you really, really stand and how you really, really feel. And I'll end on that too. It's like, there's a quote that I live by, that I learned in my sorority actually. And it was like, do not seek so much to be understood, but to understand. And you can do that with yourself, right? And with others. And I feel like that is probably the biggest key, right? Before you can try to expect things from others, try to understand and try to be in that position of, like, I don't know, all of us want to be understood at the end of the day, right? We all want to feel seen. We all want to feel heard. We all want to feel loved and those things. But until we have done that for ourselves, and until we also try to do that for others, we can't expect them to do it for us. Like, go ahead.
No, I said amen. That's all I said.
Yeah, so, and you said this was going to be a short one. Look at us.
What time is it right now?
We are coming up on the hour.
Okay.
So, with that said, we forgot to do this part last time, so I'm going to let you do the honors of, with this conversation with Manifest Mondays, we're always trying to manifest what we want to see happen. So I want to give you the honors, if you would like, to see like what is it out of this that we want to manifest for everyone here.
Yeah, I think for myself and for everyone here, like what I want to manifest out of this is a secure heart and someone who is self-loving, but also someone who can love others despite conflict, despite whatever's going on. And I want to be able to be in a community that has healed people, that hearts that are healed as well, and that we can engage in a healthy community and have healthy relationships, but also have peace. And that's something I want to manifest, not just only in Tigray, but just like on a day-to-day basis with your friends, with your family, internationally. Like, you know, it's a lofty goal per se, but I really want to see just healthy community being, I guess, the centerpiece of this kingdom. And I feel like that's what God created humans to be, in a healthy community, living alongside others with peace. And it's idealistic. Maybe it's not feasible in our lifetime, but at least we can be the generation that sustains and outlives this image and all the teachings that are around there. That we can be a community that's healthy and thriving, and that's loving, empathetic, and with hearts that are healed, but also hearts that continue to love people despite conflict, despite what might happen. So that's what I want to manifest on this Monday.
Okay, I'm here for it. I don't think to add to that. That was beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. You know, I'll be like, me and Hayet do this. So I'll be like, okay, well, speak into my life. There's very few people I will let speak into my life. We're one of them. Okay. because I feel like you do it from a pure place. So
Thank you.
got some love in here. So y'all, that is Manifest Mondays. This conversation was all about empathetic listening, um, active listening, listening to understand, right? So we're gonna wrap here. Wednesday, I have a beautiful guest coming on. You may or may not know her from the Bay. I'm not gonna drop too many hints. The flyer will be out tomorrow. And we will be back on Clubhouse Thursday. We're still trying to figure out the time because, you know me, I be catching flights. Not feelings, just kidding. I catch all the feelings on my flights. Let's be real. I'll be in the clouds like, look at the world. Okay. Um, but yeah, so you will see that. Pay attention to the socials. We'll be putting that out this week. And then everyone, if you have not already, make sure you're following Hayet. Okay, he is a gem dropper as well. Following the page, we are streaming everywhere, so this will be recorded and saved and put up everywhere else. But y'all, this series it's not an easy one, but it's a necessary one, and we just appreciate everyone sticking with us and engaging and being part of the conversation. Next week we will be back again. I forgot what's next week again.
I think it's responsibility and forgiveness.
Okay. Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Stay tuned, y'all.
Yeah, be interesting. Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Hayat, for taking time out of your Monday. And we will see y'all on the webs.
See you guys. Have a good one.